Hi, and welcome to Ruby's Ask Me Anything office hours. During this event, we always open up our platform to be able to answer questions from our students on anything cooking related. All you have to do on the Ruby platform is click on the right hand screen where you see Add Question Here. You can ask any question you'd like to that's culinary related. My topic in particular is plant based cooking, so try to keep it within those parameters. And then hit the Add button. It'll show up on the bottom right after it's gone through our moderation. And if you want a question to be answered quicker, you can always hit the heart icon next to one of the questions that are down on the bottom there. We're going to jump right into our questions here, but feel free to add any more if you have them. We're going to jump in with Rose. Rose asks, "What's the best way to get started in making desserts?" Um, well, I think in general, to be able to start making desserts is probably to do a little bit of research ahead of time. Either get a couple cookbooks or a couple magazines. You can do either of those things from like a library, um, and kind of page through them to be able to see what kind of things look good to you, what things might be in your skill level at the same time. So to make sure that you don't need, like an industrial size mixer or something like that to do the recipe. Make sure you have the equipment is on hand to be able to do the desserts you'd like to do as well too. So keep it simple, and remember specifically on desserts to be able to keep it exactly to the recipes. With general cooking, you can have a little more leeway. With baking and desserts, typically it's a much more exact science. So make sure you try to follow the recipe to the T, and then later, as you become prolific with that recipe, you can make small changes to make it exactly your piece at the same time. So that's probably the best advice that I can give you for just starting out and getting into desserts is do a little bit of research, look at a lot of cookbooks and a lot of magazines to be able to see what really intrigues you and what you can do in your own kitchen. Hope that helps, Rose. Sure, great to see you. Hi, Dan. October is cookbook month. Let me say that over again. October is cookbook month. What plant-based cookbook would you recommend to someone who is new to the plant-based world? Thanks. Great to see your question on there, Shar. Always great to see your live events too. Cookbooks are a passion of mine. I have a whole collection of cookbooks of all kinds of different types. But specifically looking at plant-based cookbooks, I have a huge library of those as well. Like starting off, I had a Deborah Madison, it was the Art of Vegetarian Cooking or something like that was kind of one of the things that got me kind of started in the plant-based world. But more recently, I've kind of been looking at more elevated recipes in the plant-based world. So might recommend something like Eric Lippert's or Vegetable Simple. This is a great book that actually, Eric Lippert's a Michelin star chef out of New York City. Fantastic, recipes in here. So some of these things are just kind of simpler areas to be able to kind of talk about what you can do and plant-based, but then it gets a little more complicated kind of the deeper you go into it as well. um, all of these are plant-based, but some of them contain things like butter or something like that that you can easily replace out with a plant-based option. Beyond that, there are a couple other ones. This restaurant, Little Pine, used to be, I believe it was, I think it was in Los Angeles. It was actually owned by Moby, but the head chef was a good friend of mine that I used to work with, Lou, and the recipes that she does are just fantastic. And this is more kind of comfort foodish, but at kind of a escalated, level to be able to uh, elevate basically for fine dining at the same time. Lou's recipes have always been fantastic. They turn out really nice. You can see this is a completely vegan cookbook as well too. So, just kind of really fun, a little more on the um, fine dining aspect. And then the other one that I would recommend is The Art of Fermentation. This is just a classic cookbook as well too. Um, by Sandra Katz, and this basically explores all kinds of different fermentations that you can do. I love to do those. Being living in Wisconsin now, I do a lot of fermentation, things to be able to preserve vegetables and fruits basically from the harvest time into winter. So I actually have quite a few things in my fermentation area right now. So those would be three cookbooks that I would recommend for you, Shar. A couple high-end plant-based, and one book on fermentation, which is actually quite simple and a lot of fun to do. So those are my recommendations. Here's another one from Rose. What's the best way to get started in making desserts? Oh, I think we already did that one. So I'm going to skip down to the next one here from Mark. Just curious, Dan, if you and other associates are interested or have purchased the Our Place Titanium Pro non-stick pan and believe in the legitimacy of it being the most non-toxic pan of its kind. Mark, I have not used those pans, the Our Place Titanium Pros. I've gone through so many different non-stick pans, to tell you the truth. The last ones I bought were the hex-clad pans, and quite honestly, for the money for them, I wouldn't buy them again. It's a okay pan, but high heat. It's going to stick. Things are going to stick to it anyways. My best advice for a non-stick pan is, I typically, if you're going to spend a lot of money on something, I would just get like a stainless steel pan or cast iron pan. It's probably one of the areas that I'd probably, if you're going to put your money into something, I'd go into one of those areas. The non-stick platforms right now are very competitive, but they're also uh, there's a lot of talk about them with not the best of performance in each one of them. I don't know anything about Our Place Titanium Pro non-stick pans. Um, but the ones that I have been using that are kind of the higher level have been kind of hit or miss. I do have to say I've been using some Heston pans lately that are the Thomas Keller non-stick ones. Those, I mean, blew my mind. I was surprised at how well they worked, but they're also unbelievably expensive just for a small pan. So my old rule is that I always kind of go to a restaurant supply store and get a small non-stick pan that you would use in most restaurants, basically. And I use that, and as soon as I see a small scratch on it, I get rid of it and recycle it. So I'll typically keep that pan for maybe 6 months to a year, but I've only spent maybe $20 or something on it. And the reason I do that is because nonstick surfaces typically are really not good for you once once the product starts kind of coming off. The nonstick surface comes off a little bit, and they're quite dangerous. So anytime I see a scratch on the pan, I'll usually get rid of them. The newest version with all these hex clads and that design you see, which is basically a stainless steel kind of hexagram and then the nonstick surface stuff sprayed between it, work okay, but I haven't seen one that's like fantastic. And I mean, they'll show you in stores and stuff like that where they're like, oh, like, I can put an egg on there and then blow the egg off of it. It's a little bit of trickery because they're doing it at an unbelievably low heat, basically, well greased, basically, too. And for like a workhorse at home, I haven't found one that I've actually been really super happy with. So typically, I'm going to stick with the steel or the cast iron for recommendations for something like that. If you can afford to go with like the Heston non-sticks and stuff like that, great, fantastic. But beyond that, I can't really tell you too much. Hope that helped a little bit, Mark. Anna Marie, is there a gluten-free or whole grain flour that could be used for baking? I looked online and it's a little confusing. Yeah, in fact, Anna, there's a lot of different gluten-free whole grain flours that are out there. There are companies that's like really zero in on that to be able to make that their specialty. And you can find all kinds of different all-purpose gluten flours that are made from different things like oat flour, or you can look for like some of the ancient grains or flax or stuff like that as well too. Brown rice flour, coconut flour, There's a huge host of different whole grain flours that are out there to be able to do gluten free with. Some of the more traditional ones would be like the King Arthur's and stuff like that as well. I'm sure they make a whole grain one, but just their standard gluten free, like bread flour and stuff like that is going to be processed as well too. So, but yeah, there are a lot of different gluten free whole grains out there. And depending on what you're making, it's usually, what you wanna kinda switch between them on, switching between if you're making, like, a muffin or a cookie or a cake or something, would be what the core ingredient would be switched up as. Alicia, do you have any advice on how to control cravings? Um, that's always a tough one, and it really kinda depends on what you're craving and what you're like, or if you're craving, like, cookies and stuff like that, and if it's a daily thing, I guess, I'm not 100% sure, but what I've always done is, um, I've always tried to keep things that were healthy snacks around, and so I'll do the same thing with my kids. I'll cut up some celery and carrots or something like that. So they're nice things to be able to snack on. I might do like a bowl of nuts, but I'll usually keep a small bowl of nuts instead of something that's really big because usually if you have a big bowl of nuts, you might tend to finish them quicker. But if you take like a small, like small dish and just put a small amount of nuts in it, you're not going to even if you eat the whole dish, it's not that big of a deal. So yeah, I think that's probably the best way I control cravings is I keep really healthy snacks around and try to keep on target with those. I also try to not snack too much between meals. I talked about a couple months ago on this platform where we're talking about a book called French Kids Eat Anything. And one of the concepts in France, sorry, is that they basically eat like three, sometimes four meals. They don't do any snacking between any of those. And it helps your digestion, but also helps you really enjoy the food that you're having at that moment for it too, right? So you're planning ahead to the meal. All the meals are basically at a table as well too. So you kind of come together as a family for eating as well. So those are probably the best ways that I would try to say staying away from cravings. Or if you have to have a snack, do something that's really healthy, something that's got a nice crunch to it. But try to stick to those kind of core meals and make them an event to look forward to. All right, the next one's from Robert. I appreciate the map of cooking for a meal, but I've had a hard time creating a week of plant-based meals. I have a couple go-to recipes, but have a hard time stringing them into a logical plan. Oh, that's great, Robert. Actually, I guess it's been about 4 years ago. I did a live event specifically on meal planning and plant-based meal planning. So you can always look that up in our live events if you use the search option here to be able to search out meal planning. I think it'll probably come up as a link for the video for it. But the best advice I can give you on, meal planning for the week basically is to be able to look at your recipes and make sure that you're using the same ingredient multiple times, right? So if you're going to say, use an easy example would be onions, but right, so let's just say asparagus, right? So asparagus is something that you might use half a bunch of, or a quarter of a bunch of. So you can use maybe half the bunch in like risotto and use asparagus that's been added to it. And then you can use the other half chopped up into a salad or something like that, or made into, put into pasta at the same time as well too. So, oh, Patrick just linked the event there. Thanks so much, Patrick. So yeah, as far as planning ahead wise, I always try to make sure that you're using the same ingredient multiple ways. That saves space in your fridge, but it also saves waste at the same time. And then think about what you can do to be able to plan ahead for yourself later in the week as well. So, if you know you're going to have, like, say, a lasagna on Friday night, can you make that lasagna ahead of time? So Friday it's just really easy where you can just throw it in the oven. Can you make a second one to be able to put in the freezer to be able to use later on, maybe in a month or so, to be able to have another easy go to kind of recipe? So that's kind of what I try to look at when I'm doing meal planning is looking at ingredients that are in season, how to use them in multiple recipes throughout the week at the same time. Hope that helps, Robert. All right. Our next one is from Melissa. What are some items you like to make in a dehydrator? I love using a dehydrator and I use it all the time. In fact, we just had apple season finish here in Wisconsin. And all of our neighbors and we have a very small apple tree that only produced one apple this year because it's only its second year in. But all of our neighbors have apple trees as well, and they invite my kids over to go pick as many apples as they can possibly get. So what do you do with so many apples that you can't carry them? We dehydrate them. We dehydrate them down into, I basically peel them and then slice them, and then put them in dehydrator. And I have jars and jars full of dehydrated apples now that my kids love to have as a snack. It's a wonderful thing. Um, that I put in their lunches. They might have it after school when they come home at the same time. And the same vein, I also do mushrooms in dehydrator to be able to dehydrate the mushrooms so I can use them in soups and other things in the wintertime, or rehydrate them to be able to use them in other dishes at the same time too. I also love to make things like kale chips in the dehydrator too. So I'll basically make like a cashew kind of cream or a bechamel or something, and maybe add other seasonings to it, and then coat kale in that, and tear it up into bite-sized pieces and put it into the dehydrator to again have as a nice kind of healthy snack. Um, Other things I've done in the past are like, like kind of sheets of like, flax and red pepper kind of crisps. You can do like a Parmesan crisp doing, like a pine nut Parmesan at the same time too. So, yeah, most of the time I'm using my dehydrator to be able to, store fruits and vegetables that, won't make it through the winter basically. But I might do some other kind of specialty things like the crisps, or you know raw taco shells and stuff like that. I used to do a lot of raw cooking when I worked with Chad Sarno a long time ago, and we did a lot of dehydration stuff then. Nowadays I use it more as food preservation though. All right, our next one's from Robert. Oh, I think we already did that one on the map of cooking. Melissa, what are a couple ways you like to use lion's mane mushrooms? I love lion's mane, and I get them as often as I can. We have a couple growers here in Madison that I buy from quite often. Um, my favorite kind of go-to that's just really easy is I make tacos out of them. So I'll use a method that Chad's brother Derek came up with, where you're basically pressing down on the mushroom, where you basically take one pan, put your mushrooms into it, season and oil your mushroom, and then put another pan, like a skillet, on top of it, and weight it down, and it kind of pushes the entire thing down and condenses the mushroom into kind of like a steak-like consistency. Now, for something like that, I would just add, like a little bit of chili powder and cumin, some oil, maybe some paprika to it, and then I'll saute those up, get a nice crispness or a nice edge on them, and then chop them up to be able to put them into tacos. I've also done the same thing where I've actually made it into steaks, like actual like looking steaks, where you can marinate it in like tamari and beet juice and stuff like that to be able to get a different kind of flavor profile out of it. Use a sim technique to be able to push it down, and then you actually have like a sliceable steak, which is pretty cool. So those are probably the ones, my go-to lion's mane mushroom, recipes. Now, again, in dehydration, you can dehydrate them, blend them up, and put them into soups, all kinds of different things. But the go-tos are probably the steak or the tacos with them. Robert, do you find that plant-based culinary is on the rise in restaurants within North America, finding a more dominant position on the menu? Do you think this will continue to increase in demand, and why? So I think, to a point, I think that plant-based culinary has definitely become more popular than it has. When I went plant-based 28, 29 years ago now, I couldn't go to a restaurant and find plant-based options unless it was a side dish. If it was like, French fries or My wife, has been plant-based as long as I have, and we joke about having to go to, like McDonald's and order a burger without the burger on it, right? Or like a fast food restaurant and go with our friends, and they would just order a normal thing, and we would order the bun with the tomato and the ketchup and lettuce. Nowadays, it's much easier to be able to find plant-based options on or on menus. I do some consulting to be able to help restaurants do that as well too. But yeah, so it's definitely become more popular in the past 5 years. Once Impossible and Beyond kind of started taking off, uh, a lot of investors started looking into the space, and it kind of ballooned out quite more than it probably should have. And so what we're seeing right now is a little bit of a recession in the plant-based space too, where people overinvested, and now those companies, there were just too much in the market. So we saw a ton of stuff that were on. Um, we a ton of stuff that were out in the market, and a lot of times a lot of them didn't survive. There were some pretty cool things that came out of it. Mostly they were like meat analogs. So there's a couple different companies like Meatly and stuff like that too, that came out with like steaks that were engineered basically, and they're plant-based, which is interesting, but that's not really my thing. If you're plant-based as long as I am, when you taste something that tastes like meat, you get kind of turned off of it because you're so used to not having meat for so long. So I'm looking for more whole food ingredients anyways. Now that being said, because of that surge, more people in the United States are plant-based than they ever have been, and more doctors are recommending plant-based recipes at the same time. So we are still seeing a lot of plant-based recipes or plant-based items on menus, which is fantastic. And there's more options, and more people are aware of how to cook plant-based now than they ever have been, where they can easily make a transition to be able to make it into something that's plant-based. So will it increase in demand? I think it will. I think more people see the health benefits of a plant-based diet. I think that a younger generation is more used to plant-based diets now. My kids have been plant-based their entire lives. And because of that, I think that we're going to see that increase in demand over time. I think that just at this exact moment, it kind of like went up really, really, really fast. And then like the bubble popped and it came down. And we're kind of like in this little bit of a slump where it's like not going all the way up, but it's much higher than it was, say, 30 years ago. So, um, so yeah, increase in demand, yes, and why has kind of been answered that same way. Hope that helps, Robert. All right, Melissa, when preserving your dehydrated fruits and veggies, do you use food safe silica packs in your jars? Actually, no, I don't. But that's not a bad idea to be able to put those into them. Like the little packets, I guess I have, and like, seaweed and stuff like that. They have the food safe ones. But yeah, I typically don't use the silica packs in those. I just put them in a nice dry, dark area, and they seem to be fine. I've never had any problems with them. The first year I did mushrooms, I was very speculative of it, but it turned out just fine, and had no problems with them. Could I eventually run into a jar that has a problem? Yeah. Our food safe silica pack seems fine. Like that's not a problem. A lot of the stuff I'll do too. Yeah, I guess I'm dehydrated fruits and veggies. Yeah, a silica pack's not a bad idea. So adding it into it might be something you want to look into. And you can always, like my kids eat the seaweed kind of things like all the time, and those always have those food safe silica packs in them. Might be good just to save those if you have some around from those and not have to go out and buy a bunch. I hope that helps, Melissa. And happy dehydrating. Well, that's the end of our office hours. I hope you guys learned something today, and we'll see you again soon. Happy cooking.